clean energy is the need of the hour. The survival of the planet hinges on the world moving towards an unperishable solution. Is green hydrogen the solution? As the world moves towards an alternative option, it becomes pertinent that the future is not compromised. The progress has to evolve dynamically. And thus, what will be India's approach to a sustainable future?
Welcome to our special series, Rising India Empowered Planet. In this series, we are going to discuss about how India can grow sustainably. India is shouldering the responsibility of fastest growing large economy at this point, and it's very critical that India continues to grow, but with sustainable efforts. I have a very special guest with me today. We have Professor Arun Sharma, who is Group Head for Sustainability and Climate Change from Adani Group, the group which is playing a very vital role in India's sustained growth mission. So thank you so much for joining us, and it's a pleasure having you on this show as always. As I just mentioned, India remains the fastest growing large economy at this point, and obviously a lot of things have changed post-pandemic, but one thing which has emerged very clearly is the kind of growth trajectory that India is on, that is quite unshakable. Now, for India to grow at a rapid pace, create enough jobs, create enough opportunities, and still remain within the range of sustainability, that's quite a task for a large country like ours. So what is your macro view on the fine balance between growth and sustainability challenge?
Well, thank you, Mihir. It's the most topical question of the time. India has to grow rapidly, and grow significantly for its people to have the quality of life they deserve. But we're also facing a problem of global warming with the impact on climate change that is not going to go away. And hence, India's growth has to be responsible. And the challenge for India is how to do it so in a way that we grow an inclusive economy and also position India as a global player in the green transition. One thing must be understood, and that is the developing world, and especially India, has not created the global warming. The cumulative emissions that India has contributed to is only 3%. India's energy consumption is 40% of the world's average. Just to get a sense of how India has to grow, if you compare with the amazing growth story of the past several decades, that's China. China's electricity consumption is 4 times that of India. China's cement consumption on a per capita basis is also 4 times that of India. And as India expands its energy footprint and the infrastructure footprint to ensure that the country grows into the future, it is extremely important that that growth is responsible. Although India is not responsible for global warming, the impacts of global warming will be felt by everyone, and India has to do its role. And I think the Prime Minister's statement at COP26 was one of the most responsible statements that could be made. I think India has demonstrated the ability to develop solar at scale, and the Prime Minister's commitment to increase non-fossil production of energy by 2030 to 500 gigawatt is a statement of confidence in the Indian capability. Now, as India grows its economy, the emissions will grow, and hence India's focus is on decreasing the intensity of emission. That is, as we grow, our emissions don't grow at the same rate. And one of the other commitments that the Prime Minister made was that the intensity of emissions has to reduce by 45% by 2030. India is looking at nuclear, but the upfront capital expenditure in nuclear can be significant. And then there is the question of sourcing uranium, but that is a consideration. India has done extremely well in hydropower, but any significant increase in hydropower has to take into account ecological impact. So no matter what we do, coal and thermal power will be with us for a while as we figure out ways to find storage for energy. Batteries will play an important role, but in the long term, it is green hydrogen that provides the ultimate solution. When we say green hydrogen, what we basically mean is producing hydrogen via electrolysis of water by using renewable electricity. And if we can get this in a significant way, then we actually have a pathway to decarbonization. Just to give you a simple fact, if the price of green hydrogen comes to 80 cents a kilogram, then using combined cycle hydrogen turbines, we actually have a pathway for energy storage and baseload power generation that is zero emission. And so what India is doing is investing in renewables, and it is coming up with policies for green hydrogen, and that provides a pathway for India to transition into a green future.
Right. So, in a way, sir, are you suggesting that how India charts its path on the front of green hydrogen is going to decide how soon we can be in the zone somewhere where we can achieve, let's say, the net zero sustainability initiative?
I think it is fair to say that there is no net zero without green hydrogen. Let me try to explain to you. In the Indian context for the energy case, we have already said that green hydrogen at a certain price point provides a way of getting baseload power, which is totally green. But if we look at different sectors of the economy, transportation, aviation, shipping, steel, and increasingly the chemicals value chain, then the last mile is dependent on green hydrogen and the price of green hydrogen coming down. Now, India is making significant strides towards battery electric vehicles, and they will play a very, very important role. But batteries do not scale to heavy-duty trucking. They do not scale to huge mining equipment, for example. And this is where hydrogen fuel cells will provide a pathway to decarbonization. If we look at aviation, again, sustainable aviation fuel or green kerosene becomes viable when the price of green hydrogen comes down significantly. If you look at the shipping sector, which is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse emissions, the case is being made that green ammonia, which will be produced from green hydrogen, can actually be used as a shipping fuel that will reduce the emissions and eventually take the shipping emissions to zero. That will be important. India is going to require a lot of steel as it builds its infrastructure. Fortunately, India is endowed with iron ore, but it does not have coking coal. But using coking coal to produce steel is also one of the most emission-intensive processes that you can think of. And this is where green hydrogen provides a promise to decarbonize steel production. So again, that is another avenue to look at it. We have to increase our cement production because India's infrastructure needs it. And if you look at any pathway to decarbonization of the cement industry, green hydrogen again has to play an important role. And even in the short term, we have to have thermal power, but we have to act responsibly to reduce the emission intensity of our thermal power plant. Again, green hydrogen from which we can make green ammonia can be blended with coal in thermal power plants to reduce the emission of existing thermal power plants. And Adani Power Limited has signed an MOU with IHI and KOA of Japan, who are actually working on this technology. So while we have to reduce our emissions, be responsible, the future trajectory of India or the world to a net zero economy and society is through the path of green hydrogen.
Historically, if we look at it, and I'm just going by some of the countries where the effort has been made in the direction of green hydrogen, I think one major challenge is creating enough demand in the economy for consumption of green hydrogen. Now, since we are somewhere in the beginning of the curve in terms of focusing on green hydrogen, what do you think we should do as a country to ensure that there is enough demand? Because if we keep focusing on supply side of green hydrogen without enough demand, it may not really meet the purpose with which we are starting off.
This actually is the crux of the issue. Much of the incentives around the world have been on supply side for green hydrogen. It is very common for Western countries to say there will be subsidy for making an electrolyzer factory, and the politicians provide that subsidy, get their pictures taken. But what the business world wants is certainty of demand. And there is no certainty of demand unless there is a clear mandate to use green hydrogen in many sectors of the economy. Now, where the case for India is different is India does not have a lot of natural gas. It is dependent on imports of LNG for natural gas. And hence, it's for the first time in Indian history, there is a source of energy, renewables converted into green hydrogen, that is completely indigenous. And that takes the debilitating yoke of energy imports, some $160 billion a year, that creates the incentive for India.
Right. So in a way, are you saying that there is an opportunity for India to somewhere position itself as a global manufacturing hub when it comes to green hydrogen?
I think we are living at one of those inflection points in history where the global warming, the need to decarbonize, and investment in green hydrogen is coinciding with the massive disruption in global supply chains because of COVID. And this has created an opportunity for India to take the initiative to become a global manufacturing hub for the equipment needed for green transition. Let me try to explain this. One of the great success stories of the recent 2-3 decades has been the emergence of China as a global manufacturing hub. And the whole world has benefited because of it, because China was able to reduce the cost of equipment for many industry sectors. And even in India, we benefited from that to industrialize the economy. But COVID has shown that the world can't be dependent on a single source or supply of equipment or for manufacturing capability. And the Prime Minister's Make in India, Make for the World directly fits in this sort of equation. Now, one of the challenges in producing green hydrogen is the cost of equipment, electrolyzers. I think India can address the biggest challenge, that's the cost of renewable energy, which could be between 65 to 70% of the cost of green hydrogen. And I think India has demonstrated that it can produce electricity, renewable electricity at scale at one of the lowest costs in the world. But to reduce the cost of electrolyzers, the manufacturing of electrolyzers has to take place in India using, as far as possible, Indian materials and using Indian cost of manufacturing. And the scaling up will be needed to make green hydrogen economically feasible for the kind of applications that we have talked about. Now, this will also provide India with an opportunity to be a global exporter of this equipment, which will make the green transition happen in the rest of the world and especially developed world, because the cost of electrolyzer will enable the production of low-cost green hydrogen in their economies. Now, what can be done about making this a reality? Well, we also understand that the Indian government is looking at PLI, the production links incentives for manufacture of electrolyzers. Initially, the electrolyzers may have to be imported, but I think those incentives will help India become a global hub for manufacturing electrolyzers, manufacturing hydrogen fuel cells, and the parts that are needed for this kind of equipment. And it also provides a great opportunity for India to really take the lead in this green transition because of the demand it is expected to create and manufacture the equipment that is needed. There are some challenges, and some challenges that we have to understand are actually being at the forefront of the R&D innovation in electrolyzers, in hydrogen fuel cells, and in the great energy transition. I think India has demonstrated that it can undertake advanced manufacturing at scale. India has demonstrated that it can bring down the cost of manufacturing. India has a great technology workforce and an entrepreneurial mindset. They are the ingredients. But in the long term, while India will benefit from technology and R&D done elsewhere, it has to become a global leader in research, in innovation, in training PhDs that will work in the Indian corporate sector and the Indian research sector to come up with the innovation that will be required to constantly reduce the cost of the production of green hydrogen. And we believe that a combination of these supply incentives, demand signals, the production linked incentives for equipment, but ultimately the investment in R&D that will take India to the forefront of research in the energy transition is an opportunity that is there for India.
Right. Sir, what I want to understand is, while we have discussed about green hydrogen extensively, isn't it high time that India also starts focusing on manufacturing of, let's say, solar panels or wind turbines, which are also, if not equally critical, at least important part of the whole value chain of green energy? Because we have seen what happens post-COVID in terms of supply chain disruptions, and not only us, but the whole world sort of saw the stress in terms of supply chains when it came to solar panels and other equipments.
I think you have made a very right point, and this is happening, and this is beginning to happen. Our own chairman's vision has always been to make India self-sufficient in everything that is needed in the green transition. I think the group was manufacturing solar panels for several years, and now that capacity is being expanded, but in a way that the ingredients that are needed are all manufactured locally. So there is no dependence on supply chain disruptions that we saw were happening. Similarly, the group has been investing in wind turbine manufacturing. We are already a fairly significant player in transmission and distribution. And transmission is an enabling infrastructure, because when you look at green hydrogen, if you only have solar, then you are using the equipment only for 30% of the time at maximum. If you have wind, you might go up to 40 to 45% of the time. But solar and wind do not happen at the same location. So you have to have the ability to build transmission lines so that you can make hydrogen in a cheaper way. And so these things are going to be fairly important. And And it is heartening to see that not just the Adani Group, but many other groups in India are thinking this way. And I think the future is very bright for India in this space. I think the COVID, the need for addressing the impacts of global warming, they have combined with the country's vision of becoming a global manufacturing hub. And India will not only decarbonize by using green hydrogen, but it will make it affordable for the rest of the world and show the way how it can be done.
Right. So you have partially answered how it can be done. My question is why it can be done only in India?
It can be done in India because I've already focused on the need. There are at least 3 different needs in India. India is short on energy supply. I've already mentioned that some $160 billion a year is spent on energy imports. This is debilitating to the Indian economy. For the first time, renewables and green hydrogen provides true independence from this dependence. The second thing is, while global warming is a global problem, and people might think that why do I have to worry if the temperature increases slightly? In India, we already are used to a lot of heat. Of course, that impacts the climate. A very small increase in the global average temperature increases the frequency of floods and everything. But there is a much near-term problem in India, and that is the problem of air pollution in our cities. And that happens because of burning diesel in our automobiles or petrol or in trucks, or using diesel power generators as stationary power for backup. And again here, green hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells, and of course with batteries, provide a solution to the air pollution problem, which is a public health challenge.
Right, that's quite heartening to hear that India has a chance to actually prove to the world that the sustainable growth is possible. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on this initiative. And it was a very interesting conversation. Going forward, we will obviously deep dive into this subject of sustainable growth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.